know, if securities dealers sold their securities the way we project managers sell our projects, the authorities would throw those guys in jail. Hi, I'm Jim DePiante. I'm a project manager, at least I used to be. Now I run DePiante International. That's a boutique consultancy. You know what a boutique consultancy is? That means there's only one guy, me. I speak and I consult on project management and soft skills. I also teach about project management and soft skills for IIL. And I'm here today to talk about projects as investments. Now, we often hear people say projects are like investments. Well, you know, people who say that don't go far enough. It's not enough to say projects are like investments because projects are investments, strictly speaking. Let's look at the characteristics of an investment. What does it mean to make an investment? Simply put, to make an investment is to purchase an asset for the purpose of obtaining a future benefit or return. Now, the amount or timing of this return can be more or less certain. So an investment has four characteristics: the asset purchased, the costs associated with purchasing the asset, the anticipated return on the investment, and then the risk associated with that return. Well, let's consider each of these four characteristics in more detail. So first, there's the asset purchased. What can we say about that? Well, it was purchased because of the likelihood that it will generate a future benefit. The asset is thus owned by the person or entity that purchased it. And not only, the owner also owns or controls access to that hoped-for future benefit. Second, there are the costs associated with purchasing the asset, and these come in two flavors. First, we have the direct cost, the price paid. How much the investor is willing to pay for the asset depends on the future benefit, the value of the benefit, the timing of the benefit, and the probability associated with both the value and timing of the benefit. But besides the direct cost, the price paid, we also have to consider the opportunity cost. The decision to invest funds in any one asset is simultaneously the decision to not invest those same funds in any other asset, and so we forego making all other investments. Third, let's consider the hoped-for future benefit. This benefit is the reason for the investment, the reason for purchasing the asset, because it is the asset that will generate the benefit. This benefit is the return that the owner will get for having made the investment. Typically, this return on investment, this ROI, is expressed as a percentage of asset price over a specific period of time, realized at specific intervals. So, ROI is the term that captures the value of the investment, and so it has those three critical aspects: how much it's worth as a percentage of asset price, when it starts, and how long it lasts. But these things aren't certain, and so we come to the fourth and final characteristic of investments, which is risk, the uncertainty surrounding the amount and the timing of the return. Generally speaking, the amount an investor is willing to pay for an asset is inversely correlated with risk. The higher the risk, the lower the price, all other things being equal. On the other hand, generally speaking, the return an investor expects to receive is directly correlated with risk. The higher the risk, the higher the expected return, all other things being equal. So, risk influences both terms in the ROI calculation, the price the investor is willing to pay and the return the investor expects. And so there we have the four characteristics of any investment: the asset purchased, the costs, direct and opportunity, associated with purchasing the asset, the anticipated return on the investment, the ROI, and the risk associated with that return. Now, let's consider the project as investment. In the world of projects, the asset isn't purchased directly, it's created by the project. The asset is exactly the result of the project. So the purpose of the project is to create the asset. The asset is project scope. And what are the costs associated with creating the asset? Well, first we have the direct cost, the price to be paid. This is exactly project cost. And of course, we have opportunity cost. The decision to undertake a particular project is simultaneously the decision to not use those same funds to undertake any other project. And so we forego the investing in all other projects. And what is the return on the investment? Well, this is the reason the asset's being created. It's the presumed future benefit of the asset, the presumed future benefit of the scope of the project. But this scope is being created speculatively, without any real certainty that it will deliver the desired benefits, which brings us to the fourth characteristic of any investment, which is risk. This is just the nature of investing, this uncertainty around the hoped-for return. So, considering the project as investment, we can see that the asset is project scope. The price paid is project cost. The return is the presumed benefit of project scope, and a project has all the same investment risk that any investment might have. Beyond that, however, projects as investments are particularly interesting. Certainly, projects have the normal investment risk associated with purchasing an asset for the purpose of obtaining a future benefit. Projects add an entirely new dimension of risk: project risk. Okay. You're the investor. Let's take a look. Consider project scope. This is your asset. This is what you are investing in. This is what you're buying. And what will you get for your money? On a great many projects, you will get less than you wanted, less than you expected. Oh, and a lot of things you didn't want, but will pay for anyways. You know, in this exalted profession of ours, those are the sad facts of the matter. But I don't know, what's your experience? Is your experience any different? Now, consider project cost. This is your asset price. This is your investment. And how much will you pay? On a great many projects, you will pay more than you expected, and quite probably more than you should. In this exalted profession of ours, those are the sad facts of the matter. But I don't know, what's your experience? Is your experience any different? Well, now let's consider the project schedule. Project completion determines when your investment return will begin. Your return begins when the asset being created is put into service at the end of your project. And so when will your project end? A great many projects finish later than scheduled and take longer than necessary. In this exalted profession of ours, those are the sad facts of the matter. But I don't know, what's your experience? Is your experience any different? And so finally, let's consider the return on your investment. The value of the return depends on how well the asset created delivers the intended benefit. So the value of the return clearly depends on project scope. The value of the return as a percentage of the amount invested of asset price depends entirely on the amount invested, which is project cost. Furthermore, the value of the return depends on when the benefit will start, and this is determined by the project schedule. So the value of the return on your investment will depend entirely on the scope, the cost, and the schedule of the project. So quite possibly, as an investor in a project, you will not get what you wanted, you will pay too much for it, and it will be delivered late. Consider now how this would play at the securities dealer. So here we are at the securities dealer. I'm the broker. I'm here to sell securities. My client is Mara. She's here to make an investment, to buy securities. Naturally enough, she has questions, and I'm going to answer her questions with project manager answers. You're here to buy securities. I sell securities. All you have to do is sign this agreement, and you can be on your way.
Hold on, though. What am I getting for my money? What am I actually buying here?
Good question. What will you get for your money? Well, it's hard to say at this point. At least it's hard to say with a great deal of precision. I mean, part of the problem is that you're not entirely sure what you want, and neither am I. I mean, what you get will be something like you want, but not precisely. On the other hand, you're going to get some things that you don't want and don't need. And oh, by the way, you'll pay for those anyway. So there you have it. I believe we have an agreement. If you just sign there, you can be on your way.
I need some answers. What's my return going to be? What's the benefit to me actually buying these securities?
Return. Outstanding question. What will be the return? Well, it's hard to say at this point. At least it's hard to say with a great deal of precision. I mean, part of the problem is that we don't have a lot of clarity around what the asset is going to be, so it's hard to say what the benefit will be. It's all so very far off in the future. Surely you can understand that. So, there you have it. I believe I've answered your question. If you wouldn't mind, just sign that agreement, and then you can be on your way.
I can't. Can you at least tell me how much this is going to cost?
I see you're an astute investor. How much will this cost? Well, it's hard to say at this point. At least it's hard to say with a great deal of precision. I mean, part of the problem, Mara, is that you're not entirely sure what you want, and neither am I. So it's really hard to say how much it's going to cost. But you know, in another few weeks, I can give you an estimate. Mind you, it will probably be low. In the end, you will likely pay more than that. So, there you have it. Can I get your signature now on this agreement?
Can you tell me when I'm going to see my assets? When am I going to start getting a return?
Timing. Timing is everything. Time is money. When will you get your asset and start to see your return? Well, it's hard to say at this point. At least it's hard to say with a great deal of precision. I mean, part of the problem is that you're not entirely sure what you want, and neither am I. So it's really hard to say how long it will take. But you know, in another few weeks, I can give you an estimate. I believe I've fully answered all your questions. If you wouldn't mind, just sign this agreement and you can be on your way.
This just isn't enough. I need to know a little bit more about my ROI. I can't.
Mara. ROI. Based on what asset? We don't know. Based on what return? We don't know. Based on what price? We don't know. And starting when? We don't know. How can I tell you about your ROI? So there you go. Now, I'm sure I've answered all your questions. If you wouldn't mind, just sign this agreement and you can be on your way with your new securities. That's not investing. That's gambling. You want to gamble? There's Macau, there's Las Vegas, there's Hong Kong, there's Monte Carlo, and the drinks are free. And I tell you, those places are a whole lot nicer than your cubicle. Please. So what does this mean now in the context of portfolio management? Well, I had said earlier that it's not enough to say projects are like investments. Projects are investments, strictly speaking, as we've seen. It's also not enough to say project portfolios are like investment portfolios, because project portfolios are investment portfolios, strictly speaking. Well, what does it mean to manage an investment portfolio? The role of the portfolio manager is to meet the client's strategies and objectives by optimizing risk and return in a context of limited resources. How? Well, for the financial portfolio manager, there are really only two possibilities. Buy, select which investments to make, or sell, decide which investments to get out of. The project portfolio manager has two similar possibilities. Select which investments to make by choosing which projects to fund, or decide which investments to get out of by choosing which ones to stop funding. The financial portfolio manager needs a way to compare investments to make buy and sell decisions. The prospectus gives the financial portfolio manager that capability. The prospectus is a statement of the characteristics of an investment. It describes, among other things, investment strategies and goals, the asset itself, the asset price, the anticipated return, how much it will be and when it will be realized, and the risk associated with the return. The prospectus is standardized to facilitate readability, comparison among alternative investments, and investment selection. Analogously, the project portfolio manager needs a standardized way to evaluate projects and make investment decisions. The information that the project portfolio manager uses to make those decisions should come from the portfolio management information system in a report that is exactly analogous to the financial portfolio manager's prospectus. This report should likewise be standardized to facilitate readability and comparison and ultimately project selection. It should contain the same kinds of information as the prospectus, as well as project performance and project risk information. Typically, this information is reported in a document called the business case. The business case is the project portfolio manager's prospectus. Now, portfolio management, whether for the financial portfolio manager or for the project portfolio manager, comes down to investment selection. Buy or sell, fund or do not fund. Owing to resource limitations, it's not possible to fund all projects, and so the project portfolio manager must evaluate the investment characteristics of each project against organizational strategies and objectives and against all other projects, and choose which opportunities to seize and which to forego. The problem is the same for the financial portfolio manager and for the project portfolio manager in that the four characteristics of each investment must be considered: the asset purchased, the costs associated with purchasing the asset, the anticipated return on the investment, the ROI, and the risk associated with that return. But there's another consideration in the project context. Recall that the thing that makes projects particularly interesting as investments is the added dimension of project risk. ROI is a function of return, asset price, and timing. And all three of these depend enormously, entirely, on project performance in terms of scope, schedule, and cost. The project portfolio manager needs to understand ROI across the full range of each of those critical project variables. And the only way to understand that is with a full regression analysis that explores all the corners of the combined possibilities. Within that envelope, there are certainly some combinations that yield an investment that should be undertaken. On the other hand, there are combinations that fall outside of the criteria for what constitutes a good investment according to the organization's objectives. The decision to invest or not invest, whether in the financial context or in the project context, is not made only once. In the financial context, once an asset is purchased, the decision becomes hold or sell. In the project context, once a project is undertaken, the decision becomes continue to fund the project or kill it. In either case, the decision needs to be made at predefined checkpoints according to predefined criteria. In the project context, it makes sense to reevaluate at checkpoints that align with project phases according to the methodology in use at the organization. It's worth noting that not only is the status of the project constantly changing, but the criteria against which the project will be evaluated are also constantly changing. These criteria might include things such as strategic business objectives, thresholds for ROI, spending limits, critical resource availability, or organizational priorities. At each checkpoint, the business case should be redone now with greater certainty. Sunk costs should be disregarded. The new ROI should be calculated considering only the current outlook for scope delivery, current projections for the anticipated benefit of the project, the current schedule, the projected remaining cost, and the current risk posture. What matters now is the new investment, what remains to be spent against anticipated benefits. Is this to-go or remaining business case still a good investment in absolute terms? Does it meet organizational thresholds. Once again, we should be dealing with a range of values, and so it's necessary to complete a regression analysis to understand under which circumstances the investment meets thresholds and under which it does not. Assuming the to-go investment is a good investment in absolute terms, is it still a good investment in relative terms? It should be compared with all other investments, actual and potential, and prioritized accordingly. In the financial context, the decisions are difficult enough. One of the primary difficulties is in dealing with the emotional state of the investor. Often enough, this would have the investor do exactly the wrong thing, which is why individuals and organizations do well to have an investment portfolio manager. The decision-making needs to be dispassionate and based on pre-established and well-defined criteria that consider the strategic and performance objectives of the investor. The problem's even more difficult in the project context. It happens often that the person who conceived the project has a strong voice in the decision-making process, or in fact, may be the decision-maker. And understandably, this person also has a particularly strong emotional attachment to the project. This creates a strong bias toward funding the project and away from not funding it. Isn't it true that it often takes a change in management before projects that should have long since been killed are finally, mercifully terminated? Project portfolio management is a continuous balancing act taking place within a context of constant change. External circumstances change. Organizational strategies, goals, and priorities change. The status of projects changes. This requires constant adjustment, and that requires that the portfolio manager has current and good information. Not many of us are project portfolio managers, but almost all of us are project managers, and we are the primary source of the information that the portfolio manager uses to make funding decisions. The key parameters that we provide input on are around schedule and cost estimates. We do well to never give an estimate as a single data point, but rather as a range of possibilities. Of course, we all understand that these ranges narrow as the project progresses, and we're all familiar with the suggested ranges to be used at various stages in the project. At whatever stage the project is in, the best thing we can do to help our portfolio manager make good investment decisions is provide the best possible cost and schedule estimates, because these bear so heavily on ROI. I suppose that's easy enough to say. That's the real challenge in project management, isn't it? Now, this talk is not about requirements management, nor is it about project planning. But let it be said, good input for the portfolio manager presumes good planning, and good planning presumes good requirements definition. Good requirements definition ensures that the asset delivered will more closely resemble what is intended. Good planning ensures that the asset price will be more precisely known in advance and that it will be as low as it can reasonably be. Good planning also ensures that the return on the investment will be more precisely known in advance, that it will start as soon as it can reasonably start, that it will last as long as it can reasonably be expected to last, and that it will be as high as can reasonably be expected. We don't want to be like that securities dealer who should be thrown in jail. We want to be able to say with greater certainty what will be delivered, how much it will cost, when it will start yielding its return. We want the portfolio manager to be able to calculate ROI with much greater certainty, and we want it to be as high as it can be because it will be based on a better asset and a better asset price, and it will begin sooner and last longer. That should keep us out of jail.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. Stay connected with IIL on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, and YouTube.